Last night, Will Lewis, the embattled CEO and publisher of The Washington Post, stepped down just 3 days after the paper laid off a third of its staff and eliminated or gutted several areas of coverage. Will Lewis will be replaced by the current CFO, Jeff D'Onofrio. Lewis, though, was nowhere to be found during the call on Wednesday in which those mass layoffs were announced. He was spotted after the next day, by the way, after an NFL red carpet event in San Francisco. Lewis's farewell letter was just 4 sentences long, but it was noteworthy. In it, he thanked the paper's billionaire owner, Jeff Bezos, but made absolutely no mention of the Post's journalists. If you go to the Washington Post website right now, you'll see the phrase, "Democracy dies in darkness." It's emblazoned on the masthead. That motto made its first appearance in 2016, which is when the Post's then executive editor, Marty Baron, interviewed Jeff Bezos and asked what had driven him to buy the newspaper in 2013.
I think a lot of us believe this, that democracy dies in darkness, that certain institutions have a very important role in making sure that there is light.
9 months later, "Democracy dies in darkness" was rolled out as the paper's new motto, a month into President Trump's first term. Now, the Post said at the time it was not meant to be a response to Donald Trump specifically, but at a time when the president repeatedly attacked the press as the enemy of the people, the motto felt like it carried an added significance, not merely as a warning, but as a promise to keep shining a light. And considering the extreme lengths that the Trump administration has gone to over the years to distort the truth, a robust press that holds our leaders to account is more vital than ever. The former Washington Post associate editor Ruth Marcus told me this yesterday.
It's not just that democracy dies in darkness, as a wise man once said. It's that corruption flourishes in darkness.
Bezos had the right idea in 2016, and for several years he was celebrated for his stewardship of the Post. But along the way, after Trump's first term, something changed. As the prospect of Trump returning to the White House became very real in 2024, critics say Bezos started to interfere in editorial matters. Things came to a head when he abruptly blocked the paper's planned endorsement of Kamala Harris 11 days before the election. Bezos then revamped the opinion section, pushing out most of its left-of-center voices, and announced moving forward that the editorial section would only publish in support of the twin pillars of personal liberties and free markets. All of this was widely seen by many as the Post appeasing Trump, leading to an exodus of subscribers and waves of resignations. Marty Baron, who interviewed Bezos in 2016, told The New Yorker this week, quote, "Bezos' sickening efforts to curry favor with President Trump have left an especially ugly stain on their own. This is a case study in near-instant self-inflicted brand destruction." Bezos told Barron in 2016 that democracy dies in darkness. He emblazoned it on the Post's masthead. But after this week, it sure feels like Bezos himself is turning out the light. I'm joined now by the longtime journalist Marty Baron. Baron served as the executive editor of The Washington Post from 2012 to 2021. Just 7 months into that tenure, Baron learned that Amazon's Jeff Bezos would be buying the paper. Marty's book, Collision of Power, Trump, Bezos, and The Washington Post, chronicles that episode and so much more. Marty, good to see you. Thank you for being with us. Marty, help us separate the wheat from the chaff here. There is a reality that major publications and media organizations are suffering financially and need to be innovative about what their futures look like. And then there's a reality that very rich people in this country are bending the knee to Donald Trump. And those two seem to have intersected at this week's layoffs at the Washington Trump, but they seem to have been going on, rumbling for a while at the Washington Post.
Yeah, look, I mean, the Washington Post is facing all the same challenges that other media organizations are facing. This is a very tumultuous time in the media environment, and generative AI has made it even worse. You do a Google search, they come up with an answer. You don't have to go to a link, don't have to look at a media outlet. Traffic is plummeting as a result of that. So there's a real need for dramatic changes. That said, at the Washington Post, things have been made dramatically worse, I think, by the behavior of the owner. Starting 11 days before the election in 2024, when he canceled the editorial endorsing Kamala Harris and said the paper wouldn't endorse anymore. Then he appeared on the stage with Trump during the inauguration. Then Amazon bought for an exorbitant price the so-called documentary of Melania Trump. And it went on from there to changing the editorial page and changing the opinion pages generally, such that there are no commentators who are essentially left of center. That has really damaged the reputation of the Post.
So what's the answer here? I understand corporate leaders wanting to keep below the radar with Donald Trump. But if you're a newspaper and a newspaper of record, it's not really a choice you have, right? If accountability and bearing witness involves crossing the thresholds of power, it is what it is. That's what you signed up for.
I do believe that's what he signed up for. I mean, that is the purpose of a news organization in this country. It's the reason we have the First Amendment. The whole idea of the First Amendment, the idea of the founders was to hold government to account. I think Jeff Bezos should have known that when he acquired the Post. I think he did know that, as a matter of fact, and he spoke eloquently on behalf of that mission. But now he worries about reprisals from Donald Trump.
Let's talk about that, because you were there when he said democracy dies in darkness. You understood, and you and I talked about this, the things that he did that helped put that newspaper back on track and as in his words, offered a financial runway. What changed? Is this because of Bezos's other interests, where he will benefit from either deregulation or the amount of money that you can make under this president? What has changed?
Well, he's denied that that's the reason, but I think it is the reason, actually. Look, I mean, Amazon has a lot of contracts with the federal government, particularly for cloud computing. Bezos has a private space company called Blue Origin. It is kind of coming into its own right now. He needs and wants federal contracts for Blue Origin. He just hosted the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, at Blue Origin just a day or so before the announcement of these layoffs at the Washington Post. And I think he's worried about antagonizing Trump and his team. So that's what he's facing. But he did buy a media organization. He bought a press organization that has a deep heritage and history and a strong mission, and he should maintain that.
Hey, unlike in some countries like Hungary or Greece, places like that, where people buy media organizations in order to prop up the administration, that doesn't seem to be what happened here. Jeff Bezos bought a media organization because it seems like he believed in what its mission was, and now it may be coming in the way of the things he wants to achieve. So what's the answer? If Jeff Bezos were to just sell the Washington Post, could that help solve this problem, and somebody who actually believes in its mission can move it forward?
Well, look, I mean, I should say right here that, I mean, the news department, and there's a division between the news department and the opinion department. The news department of the Post continues to do an excellent job, story after story, holding this government to account. And I trust and I hope that that will continue. You know, a sale is complicated because, first of all, I mean, the big question is sell to whom?
Yep.
What would their interest be? There's always the risk that the most likely buyers would be people who would be allies of Donald Trump. We've seen allies of Donald Trump who are now owners of CBS and have aspirations of acquiring the company that owns CNN as well. Allies of Donald Trump, the very same people have an ownership interest now in TikTok. So the question is, sell to whom?
Okay, and so help me with that, because that's been an emerging question for some years. What's your best answer to that? Should maybe publications of record be owned by some sort of public trust? What is the answer to that? Because we can't just have these big things, big names, big publication names moving between rich people who will all do similar things.
Well, there's no easy answer to that. I wish I had one. I mean, I think it would be a great idea if the Washington Post were put into some sort of nonprofit, if Jeff Bezos himself could capitalize it for, 10 years, put $1 billion into it or something like that, and then say, look, after that 10 years, you're on your own. He could get a tax deduction for that, and you could have an independent board, all that sort of thing. I think a lot of the subscribers who have left because they were very upset over what Jeff Bezos has done, would return to the Post. I think the likelihood of that happening is quite low, as a matter of fact. I don't believe that Bezos is interested in doing that. From what I've heard, there have been a couple of potential buyers who've approached him. He's rejected those offers. Other people have discussed the idea of some sort of nonprofit arrangement. He's rejected that as well. So apparently wants to hold on to it. You'd have to ask him why he wants to do that.
Marty, thanks as always. Good to see you. Marty Baron is the former executive editor of the Washington Post. All right, coming up, I watch a lot of Law and Order, and you often see the cops and lawyers on that show obtaining a warrant or a judge's approval before they go searching around through people's stuff. And if they don't, sometimes the search gets thrown out before it gets to court. Well, the Trump administration is using a secretive legal workaround to get hold of people's data, and they're using it to target everyday people who question Trump's immigration crackdown.